Before we dive into today's episode, I want to make sure to give you a heads up that we are going to be discussing some topics that might be sensitive or triggering to some listeners. As humans, we all experience different events and emotions throughout our lives. Some of these experiences can be joyful and uplifting, while others can be more difficult and painful. Today's episode will touch on some of those more challenging experiences, including pregnancy and infant loss, sexual assault, and grief. If at any point during this episode you need to step away or take a break, please do so. It's important to prioritize your mental health, and we fully support that. While these topics might be difficult to discuss, they're an important part of the human experience. By sharing our stories and discussing these issues openly, we can create a community of support and understanding for those who have gone through similar experiences. And I hope you join us afterwards in the Radical Acceptance Facebook group, where you can ask questions and discuss whatever came up for you in this episode. I hope this conversation can help provide a sense of solidarity and compassion for any of you who have been impacted by these experiences. So let's explore these topics together and learn arm in arm. Welcome to this episode. This is a topic that is near and dear to me, as I have experienced pregnancy loss, and my guest today has also. And I will introduce you, and then I'll let you throw in anything that I have missed, Stephanie. I'd like to welcome Stephanie Kennedy. After a second trimester miscarriage, walking through the grief and pain of that experience led her to a deep knowing that she wanted to use her life experiences to help others. She's a registered therapeutic counselor specializing in sexual abuse counseling, and her approach is a trauma-informed mindfulness and heart-based practice. And she's here supporting women through their sexual trauma, their anxiety and depression, their grief, their infertility and miscarriage, and their experiences feeling stuck and unhappy without direction. I mean, we could all use a Stephanie in our life.
I could only hope.
And this is where our arms link, because we do similar work, and we've met. We met years ago, and we're dear friends. And I couldn't think of anyone else to have this conversation with than my sister in experience, Steph. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I feel honored. I feel like I could cry right now just listening to you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, so that might happen, everybody. We welcome emotions. They're a good sign. And I encourage all guests to there's a prerequisite. People that come on this show are aware that emotions are a good sign. They're a positive sign that things are moving. And with that being said, I know that that's something that you help others with. And what's something that you want people to know as we move through this conversation that feels important for you?
I think that as we navigate this conversation, one of the most important things is that we allow what is there to be. So as I just sat here listening to you, I feel the rise of emotion. I can feel the tears welling up at my eyes. And instead of swallowing that or pushing it away, I just allow it to be there. I get curious about it. Oh, that's interesting. What do those goosebumps mean right now? That feels kind of neat. What's behind those tears? Is it joy? Is it another layer of sadness? It's just an opportunity to be curious. So I just invite everyone to experience what's coming up for them in that moment and just be with it.
Thank you. And I would love for you to share your experience with it, your journey with becoming a mom. When that began, I just got a shot of goosebumps up my back when I said that. So, by the way, if you're new to this, spirit plays a big part in this, in the goosebumps. Whatever the force is that happens when I'm doing this with you, it's like your people, my people. And that felt really important to talk about your journey with motherhood and when it actually began. Listen to the distinction.
Yeah. Okay. So I I think that I've always known that I wanted to be a mom. And honestly, quite honestly, from the time I was like probably 5 years old, I've always been attracted to children. I love children. I think I had a very different idea of what it meant to be a mom as I grew up and got married and wanted to start a family. I just had that idea. It's just what you do. That's what you do. You have kids. You just get married and you have kids. Do the things, tick the boxes. And as I began navigating, we were on a 5-year fertility journey where nothing was happening. Every month, sitting on the toilet, getting my period, crying once again that I wasn't pregnant, over and over and over again. And it was just the most heart-wrenching experience. Until one day I had some cancer cells found on my cervix. I had to have a LEAP procedure done, so part of my cervix was removed. And in doing that procedure, I was hooked up with a gynecologist for the first time and an OBGYN. And she started working with me and asking questions about fertility. And finally, when I said it had been 5 years, she said, "What? How has no one been curious with you about this? By this point, I'm 30. How has no one asked you these questions before?" And at that point, I was referred to a fertility clinic. And my husband and I underwent IVF. We were fortunate enough to end up with 7 embryos in the end. And we implanted our first embryo, and miraculously, we got pregnant. First kick at the can. And we were overjoyed. It was amazing. We'd come so far. And as I progressed in my pregnancy, I was having some hip pain and discomfort. And my midwives just kept saying, it's your first time being pregnant. This is kind of normal. You don't really know what it's supposed to feel like. And I was 18 weeks and I was at work and I felt honestly like I needed to take a shit all day. All day, just needed to poo. And just increasingly discomforting throughout the day. I just can't believe I just said take a shit. Thank you, Spirit, for allowing me to do that.
We did this real and raw conversation, and I'm pretty sure the women that listen to this aren't here to dick around. So
go.
Yeah.
So anyways, I got home finally at the end of the day, and I was in excruciating pain. I couldn't sit, I couldn't lay down, I was pacing. Called the midwife, and she said, "It sounds like you're having a miscarriage. You can go to the hospital if you want to, but there's likely nothing they'll do for you." And she kind of hands off the situation, and it was quite curious for me in the moment because I just thought, okay, maybe I'm just taking this too seriously. Maybe it's not as bad as I think that it is. And it was about 30 seconds after I got off the phone with the midwife that I said to my husband, "I need you to take me to emergency. Like, I can't do this anymore." I was in so much pain. Get to the hospital and I have to wait. Gosh, I don't know. It felt like hours. It may have only been 45 minutes, but it felt like hours, pacing back and forth and back and forth. And in emergency, I started bleeding. And now I'm starting to realize, okay, holy shit, this is serious. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, okay, obviously there's something they can do. I'm in my second trimester. Like, I've made it past that 12-week point. Obviously there's something they can do.
Yeah.
So I get in and the emerge doctor comes in to check me, and she says, "Oh my goodness. Okay. Your membranes are bulging." So the sac that our babe was in was literally like coming out of my body. So she flipped me upside down, legs up in the air. And I said, "Is there something you can do?" And she just shook her head. And I'll never forget because there was a nurse there, and I will forever have her face imprinted in my mind. And I looked at her and she half made eye contact with me, and she like lowered her head right away and looked at the floor, and she couldn't even look at me. It was almost in this moment of like, I could see her pain in my own. It was this moment of she couldn't even participate in what was going on because she was so triggered by her own pain. I'll never forget her. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, the OB came in and said, you're having a miscarriage. We're going to take you up to the maternity ward, where at some point this evening you'll give birth, and um, we'll likely be releasing you in the morning. And that was it. They took us up to maternity, which is whack, by the way. No woman should ever have to be in a maternity ward when she is birthing her sleeping baby. It's horrific. Horrific. They tried to put us kind of off in a room, but you can hear everything, right? There's
Yeah.
like babies crying and women giving birth, and there's all this, noise, and here I was just so connected to myself. And I can only thank myself for the journey I'd gone on before that, to being in that moment of actually just staying in it and experiencing what my body was going through and experiencing the whole thing so fully.
So what helped you with that? Because you're like your journey up until that point. So something prepared you for that not everybody maybe had, including.
Yeah, I
So,
think so I guess at that point was end of 2016.
yeah.
At the beginning of 2015, I started working with a spiritual coach and doing some deep diving into my past traumas, sexual assault, um,
Yeah.
family stuff. Uh, I mean, really just disliking my life, knowing that I was on the wrong path and not knowing what to do about it. And so learning some mindfulness practices, learning that there was choice in everything. The choice that I was giving birth to this baby at that time was out of my hands, but the choice of how I walked through it was mine.
Wow.
And so in that moment of, okay, and I don't know what came over to me, to be honest. I felt so guided and held. It was just very much, okay, this is happening.
Wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it was just, it was gospel. It was like everything got quiet, but you could just feel the palpitation of the energy of like a choir. It was like, it was the most beautiful, horrifically sad experience I've ever had. It was, yeah, it was incredible. And feeling my body go through the motions of giving birth was something, a trust that I'd never had in my body, a trust that we built together in that evening. And it was, it was beautiful. And then go ahead.
Wow. I'm just so aware of how, gosh, what you were given, like what your past self did to support you in that future moment, that so many of us didn't get. And I'm so curious about, like, it felt like a crescendo when you were talking. I
Mm,
literally felt like Fantasia, which is was such a weird image of like the waves crashing against the rock.
yes.
Um, and I'm covered in goosebumps again, which is like this visceral awareness of so much happening at once. And I'm just like honed in on you as the central experiencer of that,
Mhm.
and how many women are not blessed, I guess, with that focal point,
Yeah,
that they're on the outskirts. They're like, if they were instead of being in the trunk of a tree, sorry, I use metaphor a lot,
I
right?
love it.
Or I'm not sorry, but instead of being in the trunk of the tree, which is where it felt like you were at the
Mhm.
epicenter of that ocean, right?
Mhm.
That a lot of us are out on the tree branches, like and we're falling, and we're just being blown around by
Flinging.
the wind, and it's just terrifying, and we feel ill-informed or unsupported, or just like the word scared doesn't even cut it. It's like the truest sense of the word, to actually be in the word. I don't know if I'm explaining this
Yeah,
properly,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like you're in the word and you're like, oh no, I didn't know that's what this felt like. And you're just, it's like terror,
Mhm.
of the, yeah. And so just seeing this through your eyes, and thank you so much for offering this perspective to know that that is even fucking possible. Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, and I think it's important to mention that, like, as you say, it's the crescendo. It
yeah.
felt that way, but it was also, or I should say, and it was also the crescendo of the the breaking. It was the point of everything came together in the epicenter of that earthquakey moment.
Mhm.
And in that earthquake moment, the plates were shifting, like the ground was breaking, and everything that I knew to be true was falling away in that moment. It was just, as I stayed in the epicenter of it, everything I knew to be true died. It was like the woman that I was when I woke up this
Oh,
morning died in that moment. My life before it died in that moment.
yeah.
And so being in the moment was so powerful. Even as I speak of it, I feel like riddled with goosebumps. And yet that day I was like a little chameleon who had just shed all of its skin, and I woke up this fresh new woman who had no fucking idea who she was, how she existed in the world, um, with a lot of pressure to go back to who I was before. And
I mean, just the pause that requires,
yeah,
the pressure to go back to the woman you were before,
yeah.
wherever that pressure is coming from. It's like, but that's just so true. It's almost like going to reach for the edge of the pool and you
Mm,
really want to just hang on. You just want, you've just been through that and you want to rest. You want to go back to something that
mm.
anything that and it's not there. And like that feeling of what, for you, what was that? Because I know my version of that, but here we are in your story.
Yeah, that was, well, I think there was a lot of belief systems around it. And for me, and I think you had the same experience where I didn't know anyone who'd had a miscarriage before.
Oh, I
I
know many. Yeah,
You did know people before yours?
it's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
see, I knew none.
right. And so, well, actually, to be fair, I'd known one person and it was
Mm.
my mother.
Mm.
And there was a whole thing about that, about, I literally said when it was happening in my head, I guess I'm just like her. And like, I don't know, I felt this real human. Like, what a piece of this package that it came with. It was like, just open up. It's like the grossest book in the library of humanity. It was like that feeling of like, oh, where the hell did that come from?
Right.
That I was almost running through a mirrored experience that my mother went through, which was in the 60s. And so if you saw my face when you were talking about you being in the maternity ward, the reason my face did that is because I was sort of like, I can't believe that's still happening.
Oh,
Meaning
yeah.
my mother was, as we all line up arm in arm in this experience, it's different for each one of us. But my mother was such a pioneer, in this
Mm.
experience that was even more horrific because she went there and she was patted on the head and said, "Oh, it's your first pregnancy." She was 40 weeks. "It's your first pregnancy. You're overreacting. You're a woman, you're off the hinges and you're a pregnant woman." Like it was brutally stereotypical.
Mhm.
And she sat in the waiting room while she bled to death and David, my brother, bled to death. And they both died. My mom was resuscitated. And I grew up hearing about it, which is totally not okay. Like,
Mm.
just in terms of, you know, this is how codependency, the birthplace of codependency.
Mhm.
I was the one to help support my mom. I was like the feeder child.
Right.
No offense, mom, if you're listening to this, but there was a feeling of, I'm here to make sure, in a way, that she, as someone that listens to her, and I ended up absorbing a lot of that experience and like empathizing. And this is where like the blurred lines began. But in deep empathy and compassion, like it taught me so much. And I can see the double-edged sword of like how it didn't serve me. But we didn't
Sure.
know, like what did my mom know? What did I know? There was innocence in it. But no, I grew up with that, but not the details, because when it comes to that, when all of a sudden you reach that point and you're finding out you're losing, a pregnancy,
Mhm.
everyone just goes like radio silent, because they don't know what's going to happen with you, and it's never the same for everybody, and they don't want to, it just, everybody goes quiet. And something that came up was like, well, they said something like, well, we don't do research on pregnant women, so we just don't know. Like, we don't know anything. Like, how many years have we been here? And I remember
Yeah.
just so pissed off, like, are you fucking kidding me? You have no state of reference for me. You have no edge of the pool for me to go, this is what you can expect. It was like, no, this is probably what's happening. So luckily my midwife did give me some, sorry, but I needed some graphic information. Please tell me
Yes.
what I can expect. And she walked me through a couple of scenarios, all horrific. And I did mine at home. I ended up later having to have a
Oh,
DNC, which was a whole other
yeah.
experience, which I talk about on that episode. But like, which was my biggest fear that I didn't even know I had. Like, it's
Mhm.
weird how these things happen to present you with the thing you didn't know you were deathly afraid of. Like,
So much.
so bizarre. So not to sidetrack too much away from yours, but I didn't have, even with that, growing up knowing about the loss of my brother, and I still had no one shared the specifics except for my midwife, and she gave me about 3 or 4, and I was like, I don't want any of those.
Mhm.
But okay, like, and then the waiting. So like,
Ugh.
I I almost wanted to be where you were, because at least I was in a container that, I don't know, like, could support it, could
Seriously,
catch it, could fucking clean it up. I don't know. I
all
would,
of that.
you're just like, I don't know. I'm so terrified of my body. I don't know what it's going to do. And to have some facilitation in hindsight might have been nice, but we all get what we got. And
Yeah.
we get what we get. And
Well,
so,
and I think it's
wow.
important though to emphasize that my experience is unique from what I've heard of stories from clients, from other women that I've met, is that many women go through this experience alone at home on their bathroom floor. And it is a horrific experience. It's traumatizing. It is the point where the medical system lets down women in the moment that they are needed the most. It is the moment where we need to be holding one another. Like as we're talking, I have this image in my mind of like a miscarriage hotline where it's like, you're having a miscarriage, you call on these women to be there and doula you through this, because it is fucking hard and horrific and sad and physically exhausting. And so to not be held in a container, or to be held in the container of your literal bathroom floor, is takes the sacredness out of the experience.
It takes the sisterhood out of it as well.
Yes.
Like, to
Yes.
even be in the company of someone that's been through this, and for them to offer the I don't know in a different way.
Yeah.
Like, the I don't know what this is going to be for you, but there's certain things that are very present, which is the clearing of all the shelves, the terror,
Yeah.
the horror, the not trusting body, the feeling lost in all of it. But just to have a voice that said, I'm right here.
I got
I've
you.
been here. I've got you. I know this is so scary. And like, someone
Yeah.
that survived it, someone that has, that can live to tell the tale.
Yes. All of that.
This
And
is
I
what we
will,
need.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I'll never forget, I had 2 nurses, and again, I don't like, their names were Anne and Stephanie, and these two women carried me through that birth.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point crying and saying, like, I can't do this. I just can't do this. And Anne was rubbing my knee and she said, look at me. You are going to do this and we are going to do it together. Do not stop looking at me. You are going to do this. And I just remember like, okay, I can do that. Like, I believe you. I believe you that you have me. And just that moment of being held by another woman. And yes, my husband was there and going through his own experience. To have another woman hold that space for me and graciously welcome this little body into the world and clean him and wrap him in a little blanket and bring him over. Like, it was just what I needed in that moment. And I wish that for every woman. I really do. And I'm also angrily aware that that is not the case for a lot of us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. It's not. So holding space for that. Yeah. I was just a ticking time bomb. Like without just a phone call, like I could call my midwife and just, when is it going to happen? I don't know.
Mhm.
You know, how much longer? I don't know. Like riding the ferry back from my mother's house, because we were there on Mother's Day when it started. It was just horrific that I had announced it the day before, and then the next day I woke up. Like it was it was brutal. And then having that very scary, it's happening, running, panicking, you know, to the bathroom, like, and putting it in a place that just does not make any sense, and being so terrified, and that feeling in my body, you know, it's just, it is so terrifying. And what it takes from both you and your partner, and where it leaves you both on the other side,
Mm.
is so different. And it might be interesting to have a man's perspective on this also.
Yeah,
I mean, I could probably get Scott in here too at some point to talk about it,
that
because
would be
that
beautiful.
was so hard for him. And I'm
Mhm.
sure as it was for your husband.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
mean, I think I'm just jotting down notes as we're going because I keep the idea, this whole plan that we have as a society of waiting until you're at the 3-month mark and not telling anyone 12 weeks, wait, get yourself there. And it's like, the reality of it is, sure, your risk drops in percentage wise, let's just say, in the grand scheme of things.
Mhm.
It doesn't fucking matter. Right? That 12, 13 weeks came and went, whether it was by a day, for me, it was a few months. It was just like,
Mhm.
I waited, I did the right thing. I waited for that window to close. Everyone said, once you get past that, it's like, it's not true. Embrace the moment from the second that positive test shows up, embrace it. Tell somebody. Allow community to support you, because it's in what I see is that it's in the suffering of no one witnessing you in it
Yeah.
that it gets stuck in us.
That's exactly what happened, because it was the 12-week mark. We'd only told my family. So the next day we were going to call Scott's family in Australia. And so to watch him have to call his mom to say we were, but we aren't,
Mm.
was one of the most excruciating things I saw within that 48-hour period, including what I went through.
Yeah.
And that he couldn't, like, what a twisted and surreal experience that is, to have to, and it's so, and then you're like, what am I doing to this other person? Like, what am I doing to my mother-in-law? What are we doing to her? Like, hey, aren't, and then him breaking down,
Mm.
and her just like, I just got this very strange phone call with this and now that, and like,
Mhm.
you know, it was just, yeah. And I wish we had said something earlier,
Mm.
because you're exactly right. that was the hardest part. We were, but we weren't. Then I had to send an email out. I didn't have to. So that's the thing. I realize we have choice in this. Like
Yes.
we have choice about how we handle this. And being someone from communications, like I was in corporate or whatever, I've always had this thread through my life of like wanting to explain things, wanting to be open, wanting to be clear. And I also wanted to provide myself with this buffer of awareness, or for my story to be out there and to give people choice, but to be known. And I was driven to write this email to say, listen, this is a very strange email to send, like 50 odd people, and say, listen, I'm sorry, but this is what's going on. And this is what's happened, because it had happened to other people in our family. And I don't even remember what I said, but it was such an awkward thing. But as a result, I was inundated with support. I was inundated, which wasn't a bad thing. It actually wasn't.
Yeah.
There were some very confronting moments, but to have people know, have people know me, what I was going through. I didn't go into detail. I was just like, to just at least know. And then all the women in my family of various generations reached out and said, this has happened to me. And some, Nana was like, it happens, the Irish warrior,
Yes.
like of 9
Thank
children
you.
and a few that didn't make it. So she was like, it happens, move on, kind of thing. But she was still very loving, but she's always been very pragmatic. And I appreciate that. All the way through, to the deeply, more empathetic and sympathetic, and that's fine. But just to even have that at all, I cannot imagine how difficult that would be to not say anything. But I do know people that just want to kind of choose this, shut it down.
Yes.
It didn't happen. And then this is where it gets stuck. And we don't
Well,
know what we're doing in that innocent choice. And that's not wrong. It's just that to be aware that that's the consequence we don't even know of in that moment, because we just want to close it all in and close the shutters. We don't realize that we're maybe preventing ourselves from receiving something. But what if we don't have the bandwidth to receive it? So I would guess I want to offer the grace and space for that full spectrum of reaction.
Yeah.
Because I get it. And to know that there's always time and opportunities to open that up, but not to relive it, but to let it be expressed, to let it out, to actually, and there is a point, I hear, what's the point? There is a point. What do you want to jump in about? What's the point? When somebody says, yeah, well, what's the point of that? It happened 10 years ago.
What's the point? Well, I would argue to say that regardless of the experience, whether it's miscarriage, whether it's infant loss, whether it's losing a parent, whether it's divorce, whether it's sexual trauma, regardless of what the thing is, there's a few points that I always come back to. One is the work of Gabor Mate and this idea that what doesn't process lives in the body as illness in some way. And so this idea of shut it down, what's the point? It's too hard. It hurts too much, or I just can't do it. That's okay. And stay curious about what is affected by closing the door. Because inevitably it leaks out in other areas. So whether it's leaking out in your relationship with your partner, whether it leaks out in how you behave with your other children, or how you behave around other children.
How you pay for your groceries.
How you pay for your groceries.
How you drive your car.
All the things.
Yeah.
Where are you triggered? What pisses you off?
It's all underneath it. So, here's what I know to be true about everything you just said is that, and there's relief here. There's relief here, because I think when we hear this, we think, oh, I should be in it and on it, not possible. So again, grace. for letting yourself be in the full experience of it, even if that means shutting the shutters, closing yourself off, and just wanting to fucking forget about it because you just want to get on with it, because that part of you says, come on, let's get on with it. Come on. It happens to everybody. Let's go. Like we all,
Yeah.
we all have that part. And so I guess what I want to say is don't worry about it, because that which wants to exit and be revealed will be revealed. It will arise through the way you pay for your groceries, through tension, through upset. It will come up, like an infection to the surface, when heat is applied. And that doesn't mean you should be scared of yourself. It just means when you understand that that's, like everything you said about how it resides in the body and how it's just a natural consequence. It's not that you did it wrong.
No,
it's not that we're doing it wrong. It comes with the package of we get to choose. You hear that? We get to choose to shut it down. We have this free will that is so friggin' amazing.
Sometimes we actually need to. It's how we stay safe.
Exactly. And so the last thing we need to do is apply judgment or shame about how we autonomically respond.
Exactly. And I mean, for my experience, I was sexually assaulted at 17. I shut that down, locked it away. It's taken me, I'm 21 years to be at a somewhat place of peace where I know it still affects areas of my life. The reality of it is with my experience, I actually tried to go back. I tried to go back to work. I tried to move on, suck it up, get back to it, do what needs to be done. I tried that. I took 3 weeks off work, and then I tried to go back in the beginning of January, and I made it through 2 days. And knowing what I had learned, it was almost like my nervous system just knew a different story now. I couldn't shut things away like I used to.
Yeah.
It bubbled to the surface in a different way.
And what a weird and bizarre and horrible gift to not be I can't. It's just all of a sudden, I don't know. I'm just having this awful vision of almost being incontinent, but I'm just gonna go. When I have to go, you can almost feel just dangerous out in public. I'm just gonna wet myself without I'm just
I do that now too.
It is. Right. And some of us do that too after we have kids. But it's it's happening.
I feel like I was dangerous. I had, because it was no holds bar. I was so stripped down that I was literally just, it was almost like I was being driven by intuition, which is great in some aspect of the world. But when you're trying to fit into society and a marriage and jobs and paying bills and all of those I remember I came home and I said to Darren, I said, I'm never going back, and you are not going to make me. And he was like, okay, we have a mortgage to pay, we've got bills to pay, what do you mean you're not going back? He's like, at some point you're gonna have to go back. I'm like, no, I don't think you're hearing me. I am never going back. I am not that woman. And I remember just so fiercely knowing that I am not her. The woman that was then is dead. I am me now. And 4 months later, through some lots of counseling and time, understanding, grace, patience, but I took 4 months off work. And do we give women an ounce or a moment to say, I'm not okay? I'm not, I've seen clients who literally miscarry on a Friday and they're back at work on Monday. Abso-fucking-lutely not.
Yeah.
Never.
Whether it's masterful coping skills, absolutely bow down, masterful. And here's the thing. We don't know. There's no casting of judgment, but we don't know how that's going to unfold for people. We don't know. Some people are just built, and I'm in awe. I'm in awe of that. I am not that. And I had a similar experience. I tried to go back it just felt so bizarre. I did stick it out.
Mm.
I did stick it out, and it was fine actually in the end. But yeah, there was a whole other thing going on with that. Like there was a co-relationship happening with my work and me and my life. And I almost knew I was meant to be playing something out at the same time. And as I'm talking, my hands want to do almost like a double helix. Like there was something, I knew there was something playing out, and they gave me plenty of grace and space, and I had lots of autonomy. So I remember feeling like there weren't a lot of people that were going to be in my face. So, but yeah, the next day, but I mean, depending on where you live, it depends on how the culture honors grief and loss and how valid that lot. Like, anyway, we could go off from several different directions here.
Oh
clearly.
yeah.
But like, that was what you did. And this is like, oh gosh, we do have so much to say about, we have so much to talk. I want to go everywhere because these are catalytic moments. These are bombs that go off, these beautiful beings that touch down in our lives. Mine was 12 weeks, yours was 18, my mom's was 40. And why? And like, why? And here's what I would love to hear from you, because perspective is everything. And I think we benefit so greatly from hearing other women's perspectives, and we are on the right track because I just got double hit with goosebumps.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, we're in the right direction. And so this idea of this bomb going off in your life and like the trajectory of which it's almost like you think you're headed in this direction, southwest or southeast, whatever it is. And life says, nah, grabs you by the face or other parts and says, you're off course.
Yeah.
And then this catalyst is the thing that essentially blows up every fiber, aspect, element of your knowingness, beingness, confidence, like what you know, what you trust, and it's all kind of obliterated.
Yeah.
And I have to say this, if you let me know if what you have to add to this, which is miscarriage and pregnancy loss in and of itself is this inside out. Like I've never known a loss or a grief that was so multifaceted inside and outside, and so deeply personal, that is almost fine-tuned to like the blueprint of us being here individually. Yes. And so when you have that bomb go off in your life, and how, like, notice how it catalyzed you, like what it shot you out into, like where it spat you out. Yeah. Like the Hudson Turnpike or something like this, the sewage going into
You're supposed to be over here.
It's like, yeah, it's sort of a sewage pipe that bursts, but whatever it is. But so when I say that, what do you sense, or what comes up for you around that, for you and this baby that was like, you know what, here and now not here?
Well, I think that I got really caught in the healing process. I got caught on, he was growing perfectly. When I went into labor, he was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong. And then I had a compromised cervix because, as I said before, I'd had this sleep procedure. So my cervix was compromised and therefore just opened. And he was escaping without even knowing. He was perfectly content and happy in there, growing like a perfect little weed. And I could not get over the fact that, why would this happen to me? Why would this happen to me? And there was something that came to me in my journey, or something that started to flip that language of, why did this happen for me? What is this for me? That it wasn't actually something happening to me. And when you're talking about that inside out piece, it feels like when we grieve in life, we're grieving usually the loss of something, the loss of a person, the loss of a job, the loss of whatever you're grieving, a pet. And when you go through a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss of any kind, it feels like, yes, sure, you're grieving the loss of this babe that you no longer have. And you're grieving the loss of never taking that kiddo to preschool, to kindergarten, never seeing them put their shoes on for the first time. And you're also grieving the loss of the change of your body, what's going on in your body. And you're also changing the loss of who you are. It is so multifaceted that it's actually even hard to put language to, because it's a grief that encompasses you physically, emotionally, spiritually. It makes you question the world. It makes you question your own body.
It's like you're in your place in it.
Yes.
Like this human body, and then all of a sudden there's a distinction in a way that you never comprehended before.
Yes.
Like, I've never been so palpably aware of the partnership or not that I felt with my body as the being that resided in it, and realizing that it may very well have its own agenda. And I think that was humbling, a little scary, but luckily I didn't go down a road that deepened a chasm or a distance, in at least to my knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, I'm aware, maybe tomorrow I'll find out that is in fact what happened, like, that's the thing with this human gig. It's like I've had my ass handed to me enough times to be like, that was not on my bingo card. I did not see that on my bingo card. So I don't want to be silly and just get my ass handed to me tomorrow. But that's the piece. And the identity piece.
Oh, yeah.
Identity piece. The irony of my journey was that when we found out I was pregnant, I could not have been more detached or separate or distant from the idea of motherhood. I was so consumed with what was going on with my work and how dissatisfied I was. And I had only just dug myself out of a hole of depression that had happened after the previous year, which was a very expansive year, which was 2007. And 2008 was just horrible. And I was trying to recover, and I was starting to read a book, and I share about the details of that in another episode, but it's like I was just trying to figure my shit out as the human that I knew myself to be. And then all of a sudden, I had this chaotic work trip. I was pregnant at the time, didn't know it, came home and was just like ignorantly like, oh, I don't know, I'm so effed up. Like my period's all effed up, and da-da-da. And Scott being the wide-eyed, hey, like, maybe you're pregnant. And I was like, just being like, what, where did you come? You don't get it. I'm messed up. Like, it was just like, no, it's me. I messed up. He bought the test. I took it. I found out. Next thing I know, I'm in a cold tub. I saw the results. It was not a Hallmark moment. I was in a cold tub that wasn't even full. I don't even know how I got there. He walks in, sees the test, and starts joy crying, like the thing that everyone on TikTok looks like, like the reveal. And I'm looking at him like this. And I was always the nurturer. I was always, like you're saying, I always grew up as the friend mom. I was like the mom of my friends, and motherhood would be a natural, like, of course, and like celebratory. This was not that. And a part of me, we're speaking about the identity piece, was like, I remember feeling like, well, I guess I can't figure that out now. I'm a mom. Like, and like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, I was just like, like, where is this where they go? Is this where they go? And he was like, Scott was like, what's wrong? Because I was like, just not myself. And he's like, this is so great. He's on the side of the tub looking at me, and he's like, oh my God, what's going on? And I was like, I've never been pregnant before. Like, I just squeaked it out, and he started laughing and crying. And I was like, my God, no, for real. Like, you don't get it. Like, I know I'm 30 something, but like, and I felt so strange because I wasn't 18. I wasn't like a teen mom,
right?
But you still have that feeling. And I remember thinking, this is so wrong. This is so unnatural. But I was going through a personal crisis before this identity was kind of thrust on me. Oh my God, no one talks about that. No one wants to talk about that moment, that there weren't like running through a field of daisies, like to their partner, and like, I'm her mom, And so I felt deep shame about that and confusion. And who do I tell about this? And then to feel confused, build up that confidence, get on board.
Mhm.
I was on board by the 12-week mark. I was, oh boy, did I just make peace with all this stuff. And I was so foolishly aligned with the identity. I'm ready. And then nope. And then the rug, so like
Mhm.
jerked around. Like, can
Oh
we
yeah.
talk about that energy of getting jerked around?
Well, I mean, I
Jerked
think
around.
that jerked around for me, it was like, fuck, I'd been on a 6-year fertility journey. I do, egg retrievals, and we're going through I have to do hormone injections, and, like
Yeah.
for anyone who has done IVF treatment, like, fuck, kudos to you, because I'm holding space for all of it. It's so all encompassing. And for anyone who hasn't, it's fucked. It it is fucked. It is like the highs and the lows, you're peaking and valleying in moments. It's just like boom, 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 everything, your emotions are all over the place. And so, yeah, I get to this point, like we've had to do fertility treatment. We're 18 weeks along, and then I see myself, I'm a mom. Like I'm making plans. I've got, when I go on, and I have all these plans. When I go on mat leave, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become a counselor. I knew I always wanted to be a counselor.
Yeah.
And I needed to get out of this fucking dead end, like corporate job. And I'm just over it. It doesn't feed my soul. I feel like I'm slowly rotting and dying inside, going into this office every day. I know I have big work to do in the world, and I just need to have this baby and go on mat leave, and then I can do it. And then all of a sudden, nope, you're not having the baby. Nope, you're not going on mat leave. You are going to sit in this pile of shit until you decide to dig your ass out of it. No one's doing it for you.
Mhm.
And this baby and the soul came to me.
Can you share his name? I'm
Yes.
sorry, I should have brought him in sooner.
His name is Deacon.
Thank you. Didn't feel like
And
spelling it off there. I'm like, come on,
yes,
what's his name?
he changed my life.
Mhm.
Truly the catalyst to the deepest grief and to accessing the highest highs of joy. I experienced things even with Darren, I had gone through these moments of like, I needed to do a ceremony. I needed to honor this little being. And I'd gotten all these things together. I'm going to do a burn and candles and all these different artifacts and crystals and all the things. And I convinced Darren that this is what we're doing. And he's like, okay.
These men, can we just take a
Right?
minute? These men that are these type. This is
Seriously.
anyway, go.
Well, and I say to him, I need to have a service. I need to do a ceremony for him. And I didn't need it to be big and with other people. I just needed him and I to acknowledge his existence and process. And we did it multiple times. We'd go to a riverbed and do it on the side of the river. And I would burn, and we would shake ashes as if we were, depositing his body. We never did decide to take his body. And so there was just constantly this stripping down, the tearing away, the digging out,
Mm.
the understanding that spiritually, this soul came to shake things up. What's coming? Something's coming.
Mhm.
That's there.
It was what you just said. It's like what he wanted for you. Like, I just want to open up this
Mm.
perspective because I don't want, sometimes people will hear the way we speak or I speak, and they'll be like, oh, you're so positive, or just trying to put a positive spin on it.
Yes.
And there's something that switched in me. I don't know when, maybe I'll talk about it in these episodes at some point. But that was like, I was told in no uncertain terms that I was told that whatever happens to me has nothing to do with my value or worth.
Mm.
Nothing. off the table. Like it was like, that isn't even up for discussion.
Mm.
And I remember being like, okay, so if I'm not the worst human on the earth, and if I'm not being punished, and if I'm not bad, and it was like, you don't get to access any of that.
Mm-hmm.
The next question was, okay, well then if it's not that, then what is this? So that began my relationship with what else, instead of why, but why is a fine thing to ask. Sometimes it can just make us feel defensive or victimized.
Yeah.
But it's like, what else might this be?
Mm.
And I think, and I just got a shot of goosebumps. So it's like, I want to offer that out to anyone that needs it. If you have those thoughts, or I'm being punished, this is the worst, feeling victimized, rightfully fucking so.
Yes.
Dramatic, devastating.
Yeah.
There's all the shelves out, inside and out. And so it's like, that absolutely gets to be a part of this. And what else, if you could even open up to consider or sense into what else this might mean, what else it might be here for, not even to say for me, like, because so I want people to know how to get through this, to get into this room, because it's like, I can't even walk in that room. Like, I don't know how to get it. How do I even get into that room, Karen? You know what I mean? And so here's a question. So let's say you didn't have that perspective, that this was for you. Okay. Look at what this experience had you do. Look at what this experience had you be. Look at what it had you feel. Tell me a bit about some of those three things. Like, what did it have you do because you were cornered by it? What did it have you say? Maybe some had to be said now because you had no filter. Do you know what I mean? Like the things that it cleared away that created space to happen, whether you felt in control of it or not. Like, what are some examples for you where you were like, it had me do and see and be these things that I never would have done, been, or said without it? So what were some of those things for you?
I think one of the first things that comes to me is the processing of grief in like an animalistic way. And what I mean by that is hearing myself cry and wail and release, and hearing noises that I'd never heard come out of me before, and not having control over those moments to shut it down. It was coming, and maybe I surrendered to it in those moments. I don't even know that I had the energy to fight it. Like, I think I was just so exhausted. That was one of the things, was animalistically processing. The other thing was asking for help. I was fucking broken. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't coping. I couldn't drive a car. I don't know why. I literally couldn't drive. Darren would get me up in the morning. He would drive me to my mom's house. I couldn't be alone. He would drop me off at my mom's, and she would do crafts with me. She was like a godsend. And it was like that for weeks and weeks and weeks. My milk came in. She helped me with cold cabbage leaves on my breasts. Like, it was painful. I cried, and she just let me process, but I couldn't be alone. And finally, I had to go to the doctor and ask for help and go on medication. I had to take sleeping pills for a while, and I had to take some anti-anxieties. I was so overwhelmed by grief that I could not function in a day-to-day life. So help, asking for help.
And just while we're right there, like when the defenses are down, once you, having gone through this a couple of times, like once with our first pregnancy and another with my dad, this level of such close and devastating grief, it pulls the walls down where you have no defenses.
No.
And to me, it's this element of radical receiving where you, like when you said, I don't even think I had what it took to say no.
Yeah.
And then to live through the fact that you either asked for help, someone offered it, and you received help, however you received the help, it almost seemed to seems to storm the gate that was previously up, for then you to have that experience of receiving help on a scale that you have never received help before, only to show you what did it show you that it's like rings a bell you can't unring now. So that changes everything.
Yeah, I feel like it showed me a couple of things. I think it showed me the truth of who can show up in those moments for you. That was very blatant and clear.
Yeah.
And that is not a like a knock at anyone. It's just some people are equipped with whatever it is that it takes to be in the muck, and some people are not. So that, and I would say when you're so stripped down, to be held in a way that is nurturing and nourishing when you can't ask for it, and you don't even have the capacity to say no, and you just surrender. That word keeps coming up, and I feel like it's all part of any healing journey, really, is that surrendering into what is, surrendering into allowing support to be there.
Yeah. And how we'll fight that. We'll fight that. But then when you don't even have that, I think that's that radical receiving. If I had it, I'd use it, but I don't have it. So I'm now being held physically by someone that I have never been held by. And I am, like, when you said surrender, it's almost like handing yourself over into the arms of another person, whether it's physical or just even emotionally feeling their support, but then receiving what that feels like and wondering, why have I held this off for I needed this without this experience. And I think that's an awareness that you only get in those moments. And you realize this whole time I could have, and I didn't need
the depths of connection that are possible. Yeah, it's like, I mean, speaking just like, Carmen is one of my best people. And at the time, she was my realtor. And when all
she's
shit
not
hit
the realtor.
Clearly, when shit hit the fan, when you were talking about, you sent out an email, I did a Facebook post the day that we got home from the hospital. And I just had to blast everybody. Here we go. Here's the story. This is out there. Everybody knows. And who showed up at my parents' house with a bouquet of flowers but Carmen, my realtor, who is now one of my best people, who walked that journey with me unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And allowed me to show myself in a way that I'd never shown myself before. And then the women that I was in circle with, like you and all the other beautiful women who held space for my processing. I really did dive into support. And I, whether it was circle or therapy or spending time at the beach, writing in my journal with a piece of pie and tea, it was just finding the things that made me feel like, I felt like I had some form of control over my life. B, processing, feeling like I was healing in some way, and finding who I was again in a new way. Who is this woman? What does she desire? How does she want to show up in the world? What clothes does she want to wear? What color does her hair feel like she wants it to be? Down to every last piece of who I was.
And what you're speaking of is almost the last thing we would expect to find possible in such a destructive, inside out loss, that it's like, well, what else is this? And what that question just opened up hopefully shows this, how to get into that room. Because without and it's not making it positive, because none of it was positive. It was resonant as hell. Like
Mhm.
it's a bell that, it's not, it's all sorts of frequency. But when you ask that question, you start to see what that catalytic moment launched you into doing, being, and becoming
Mhm.
by staying connected to how you felt and honoring that in every moment. This is obviously a two-parter. So
Yeah.
this is clearly a two-parter. So meet us on the next episode where we continue this deep and delicious conversation.
I'll see you soon.